Hey guys, welcome back. Today's video is going to be my fall book recommendations video. I think I'm gonna call it the creepy and cozy fall book recommendations because I have a couple books on here that are a little creepy, but most of them are cozy because I personally don't like reading a whole lot of scary books. Even though it is October and it is the spookiest month, I'd rather read books that are more like childlike in their spookiness rather than like full-on books about demons and stuff. I just like that stuff really freaks me out. So I have kind of more tame creepy books on here. And this is my first fall recommendations video to make on my channel, so I probably have some repeat offenders on here from other people's fall recommendations video, but maybe it's just a sign that you should pick up these books even more. So yeah, without further blathering on, let me get into the creepy and cozy books I would recommend for you to read during fall. So this first book is probably the coziest book on the entire list, and it is Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. This is a young adult, new adult contemporary. I know a lot of the times when people say new adult, it just means basically it has explicit sexual content, but this one doesn't. At least as far as I remember, I don't think it does. If you don't know what this book's about, we follow our main character, Kath, during her first year at college, and she is kind of a very introverted, shy girl, and she writes this fan fiction for this series called the Simon Snow series, which is heavily influenced and based off of Harry Potter. But she runs this like super successful fan fiction blog story, and that's kind of her whole life, and her whole life revolves around the Simon Snow series. But she has this twin sister that she's always been really close to, but now that they're separated during their first year at college, Kath is feeling quite lost. But the main reason I would recommend this to read during fall is because the book starts during Kath's first fall semester at college, and Levi, the love interest, works at a coffee shop, and he's always described as wearing like plaid shirts, and I heavily associate plaid shirts with fall. And yeah, this is the only contemporary on the list, so of all the contemporaries I have read personally, I think this one would be best read during fall. Now the next book is actually probably going to be the most creepiest book on this list, and that is The Diviners by Libba Bray. This is another book that I think has probably been mentioned in so many other people's October book recommendations, fall book recommendations videos, but I'm just going to echo their sentiment. I think this book is perfect for the month of October. It is so eerie and creepy and freaky, and there are definitely chapters that are a lot more terrifying than others. And in case you don't know what The Diviners is about, we follow our main character, Evie O'Neill, who has this divine gift that she's able to access people's memories and secrets by holding something of value of said person. And at the beginning of the book, this gift of hers gets her into a little bit of trouble with her parents, so they send her off to New York City to live with her uncle, who her uncle is in charge of this museum of supernatural artifacts and like the occult. I can't remember the correct title of his museum, but the museum is run down and her uncle's running out of money to keep it going, so Evie takes it upon herself with a little bit of her own selfish ambition to start getting more coverage for the museum in the newspapers. And thanks to all of the murders that have been happening in New York City, which I don't think I mentioned that this book takes place during the 1920s, which I think is a perfect time period. I don't think any other decade would have done this story justice like the 20s did, especially in New York City. But anyway, going back to what I was saying, there have been these murders happening all over New York City, these very gruesome, brutal murders, and on each victim's body there's been some emblem or insignia brandished onto their skin. So it gets pretty graphic in those moments, and the murderer, whose name is Naughty John, all I'll say is he's not entirely human. And that's all that I really want to say regarding the plot. If you didn't pick up on why I think this book would be perfect for fall, it's paranormal, it deals with murder, there's a mystery, and I absolutely loved all of the characters, but we get chapters from the perspective of Naughty John when he does his killings, and those are honestly the chapters that I was scared of the most. And so definitely make sure you're not alone in the house or you have plenty of lights on when you get to those chapters, because they are not for the faint of heart. But yeah, I would definitely recommend this to read specifically during October. The next book I'm going to recommend I read earlier this month. I finished it at the beginning of September and absolutely loved it. I think it's now one of my top 3 favorite books of all time, and that is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. My love for this book is infinite. I want to reread this book so bad, but I have so many other books that I need to get to, so I'm holding off rereading it, but I loved it that much. And if you don't know, this book is an adult historical fiction magical book that revolves heavily around this place called the Night Circus and these two magicians, Celia and Marco, who were raised since childhood to basically out-magic each other. That's not really putting it in as romantic terms as this book is written in, but trust me, it reads so beautifully. And I'd recommend this book for fall because the story is so luscious. It's such a luxurious story, and I don't say that often about books, but this one I do say that about. There's a lot of mentionings when they talk about the Night Circus that reminds me of like my time at festivals or carnivals during fall, because this book mentions salted caramel, popcorn, hot cocoa, warm apple cider. What else do they mention? Oh, caramel apples. Every fall food you can think of, I think, has been mentioned in this book, so that really amped up the fall vibes of this book for me. I will say though, this is a much slower paced story, but for me, I find that I was totally unbothered by it because it was setting up a lot. There's so many characters. We follow the lives of every performer of the Night Circus, so I kind of understood why she had to set up all that she did, and it was done so beautifully. The writing is so gorgeous and enchanting, so it even made the boring parts interesting. So I would so recommend it for any time of year, but like specifically best read during fall in my opinion. The next book I'm going to recommend is for those of you who like to read more fantasy-esque books during the colder months, and I'm going to recommend The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This is a YA fantasy story revolving around fae, and in this book our main character Jude is fully human. Her and her twin sister, both fully human, live in this land of fae called Elfheim, and they were raised there by their parents' killer. So when they were 7, their parents died, and at the hands of this man they were taken into Elfheim, and this man raised them as his own. So just imagine how Jude would be now as, I think, a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old. I can't remember how old she is in this book, but she's a bit hard and rough around the edges and much more of a gritty main character than what I've read in my reading life. And so in this land of fae, Elfheim, they do not like humans. They have no respect for humans. So Jude has been heavily bullied and picked on growing up, and she's getting pretty tired of it, and she wants to be powerful among the fae and show herself as better than them because she's been looked down on all her life living in Elfheim. So that's basically Jude's whole entire quest throughout this book, is she wants to gain power by any means necessary, and she goes to some great lengths to do so. She's definitely a character I feel like people will never really know if they do like her or not, but she is a character you understand why she's doing what she's doing. But anyway, the reason why I would recommend this book for fall is, like I said, it is a darker fantasy novel, especially for YA. It deals a lot more heavily with politics, and the first half, I will say, is pretty slow, but the second half just totally blew me away. The action, the plot, the characters, they all surprised me greatly, and I didn't think that could happen because I found the first half so slow and a little tedious to get through, but the second half more than made up for what the first half lacked for me. So yeah, I would recommend this one to read when it's colder outside. The next book I'm gonna recommend is for those of you who might want a more sad, almost depressing read, and that one is Speak, the graphic novel written by Laurie Halse Anderson, illustrated by Emily Carroll. I read this one back in July? August? I can't remember. This is definitely a much more sad, melancholic book, so if you wanted to read it maybe during a rainy day, an overcast, cloudy day, I think this one would be great. And this story follows our main character Melinda during her freshman year of high school. The summer before her freshman year, something horrible happened to her that she doesn't really speak about to anybody, and all of her friends turn on her. And in case you don't know what happened to her during the summer, it is explicitly stated at the very beginning of this book. There's an author's note that says what this book's about. But if you don't want to know, I'm probably not going to say it, but I will show you guys maybe some of the artwork in this novel. The entire graphic novel is black and white, so it adds to kind of the more sad tone of it, but I surprisingly didn't cry when I was reading it. I was fully expecting to, but I didn't. So since I didn't cry, I don't know what that really says about me. Am I heartless? Am I unfeeling? Probably, but I would still recommend reading this during the fall months because it is very sad. Now the next book I'm going to recommend is another personal favorite of mine, and that is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. This is an adult sci-fi thriller that follows two main characters of Victor and Eli, who at the start of this story are college roommates, and for one of their college research papers, Eli takes it upon himself to research EOs, or extraordinaries, which is this story's version of superheroes, and to become an extraordinary, you have to have had a near-death experience, have been resuscitated, and through that process, you have developed these supernatural abilities that makes you, therefore, an extraordinary. So Victor and Eli eventually do become EOs, but through the process of becoming extraordinaries, something happens that splits them apart. Eli sells Victor out, Victor goes to prison, and so like the present story takes place once Victor's broken out of prison and he's hell-bent on getting revenge on Eli. So on top of this being a sci-fi thriller, this is also an awesome revenge tale. Victor is so adamant on getting Eli back for what happened, which I won't say what happened because you need to read this. I'm obviously recommending it to you to read it. The second book, Vengeful, just came out yesterday because today is Wednesday the 26th and it came out yesterday the 25th, so I will definitely be reading the second book, so I highly encourage you guys to read this and maybe also pick up Vengeful, Vicious number 2. And this last book I'm going to recommend is the other creepier book I have on my list, but it's not creepy in a paranormal sense. It is a YA psychological suspense thriller. I think that's how you would classify it. I honestly use those words so interchangeably when talking about books like that, like suspense novel, thriller novel, mystery novel, crime novel, all of them, they could all potentially be the same thing in my opinion. But anyway, that book is Dangerous Girls by Abigail Haas. This is for young adults, by the way, and don't let this cover like fool you. Like the pink cursive font is so not up to par with what is inside of this book. This book is a lot darker than what this cover I think translates. So if you do not know what this book is about, we follow this group of friends who are spending spring break in Aruba when one of the girls named Elise is murdered pretty brutally in the vacation home that they're staying in, and our main character, Elise's best friend Anna, is on trial for the murder of Elise. And so Anna is therefore trying to prove her innocence. She's trying to convince people she's not guilty, but everyone around her seems to think that she's guilty and that she's a pretty dangerous girl. So that's all I really want to say about the plot. I read this back I think in October of 2014. I read it completely blind. I did not know anyone else's opinion about this book and it freaked me out as an 18-year-old girl, and this was like my first suspense thriller book I've ever read. It weirded me out so bad. I will say I read this in one sitting, one evening in October, so it's a really fast-paced read. Even though it's nearly 400 pages, it went by incredibly quickly, and the entire time I was reading it, I was constantly second-guessing myself. I thought I knew how it ended at the beginning, but then as I read, I kept thinking like, no, that can't be possible. How would she write that? Oh, but maybe this person killed Anna, but how would they have done that? It's just like you're constantly second-guessing yourself, and so once you finish it and you see the outcome, it's not the best feeling in your stomach. It definitely put me in a little bit of a funk, so I think if you want a book that is able to do that, this book did it for me when I was 18, so I would recommend it to read during the darker months because this is a much darker story. Alright guys, with that wraps up today's video. I hope you guys found some books maybe that you're more interested to read than you were before watching this video, and definitely feel free to comment down below some of your fall atmospheric reads. I love watching fall recommendations videos, so if you guys have any books that I didn't talk about or you think I'd be interested in, or just books that you really like to read this time of year, let me know what they are, because like I said, even though I have my own TBR to tackle, I'm always on the hunt for more fall reads. So yeah, thank you so much for watching and commenting, and I hope to see you guys very soon in my next video. Bye!